Today we're going to look at King Hezekiah in Isaiah chapters 36 and 37. Hezekiah is got to be one of my favourite kings in the Bible, one of my favourite stories, because he's a king that overcomes overwhelming odds. He is threatened by the world's superpower and wins, something that doesn't happen too often in life as we know it. And yet, as I kept preparing this, I couldn't help thinking that most of Isaiah and the story of Hezekiah turned out to be something for me personally. Here is Hezekiah, situation in Assyria, verse 1 of chapter 36. In the 14th year of Hezekiah's reign, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked all the fortified cities of Judah and captured them, which sounds actually quite trite when it's just reduced to one verse. Here, in the records of Assyria that they've discovered, it actually records that he destroyed 46 fortified cities. These are cities with defenders, with walls, with anti-siege mechanisms, and he took 46 of them. If you can imagine in your mind's eye that sliver of part of the world as Israel, we've seen the map so often. He's coming down the seashore, down the coast, and picking off one city at a time. The unstoppable enemy is coming to get Jerusalem. He comes far south. He destroys 46 cities, and then he's putting siege to the last city defending against Jerusalem. This is a city called Lachish. Along the way, the Egyptians panic and think they're trying to stop him. So they send the Egyptian army out, and he just destroys them, defeats them in the field of battle. And he surrounds Lachish, and they know that as soon as he takes Lachish, the next target is Jerusalem, and God's people will be wiped out. So while he's laying siege to Lachish, he sends a field commander over to the city of Jerusalem that starts to discourage the Jews, starts to threaten them, starts to persuade them. Why don't you just give up? Stop this resistance. As a famous film said some years ago, resistance is futile. Give it up. Don't do this. I did prepare quite a different message, but it just seemed inappropriate today when I'm also facing my own Assyria. A powerful, unstoppable enemy. An illness for which there is no known cure, and in the best situation will condemn its sufferers to a decades-long life of increasing frailty. It's not even a merciful disease. Cancers are nasty. My mother died of cancer, liver cancer too. And it's nasty, but it took her in 6 weeks, wham, just long enough for her to get everything right. But for the rest of us who survive, we have to linger on. Parkinson's disease is like that. Nobody dies of Parkinson's disease. The sufferers just hang around for 30 years while their body rots away and their brain goes to mush. 46 fortified cities. All the defences going down one at a time. And in his first speech, we have this field commander in verse 6, approach the walls of Jerusalem. And it's this speech filled with lies and accusations. In verse 6, he says, are you going to rely on Egypt? Egypt? Are you kidding? We've destroyed Egypt. There's nothing left. What are you going to rely on? You can't rely on Egypt. And that's, in fact, what Isaiah told him consistently throughout the book so far. Second one, he says, you can't trust the Lord. No, I think this is a huge misunderstanding. He said, you can't trust the Lord because you've taken away all the places of worship. You've taken away all the altars, taken away all the high places. You can't trust the Lord. Well, Hezekiah was actually obeying God. God had actually told him, I want to be worshipped only here in the temple, only here in Jerusalem, so get rid of all the other places. A huge miscalculation. But then he comes back and says, challenge, come on, I'll give you 2,000 horses if you have riders to put on them. The meaning is, you're weak. We have an army here of about 500,000 men Can you even put up 2,000 horsemen? You can't do that, can you? You're nothing. And that was true. And the last one, in verse 10, he says, you've got no hope because the Lord told me to destroy you. Which is a twisted truth. It's partly what Isaiah said, but partly not. Because Isaiah always offered some hope. But it is true that the Lord told them Assyria would be the Lord's instrument in disciplining his people. The best lies have some truth mixed in. We know this. The Bible tells us. The serpent says to Eve, eat the fruit. Your eyes will be open. You'll be wise like God. Untrue. You will know good and evil. True. But not in the way she thought. There's always a sting in the tail. 46 cities as relied on as defense, and they all fell. Egypt was defeated in battle. It does make me think of what's happened in my journey over the last year and a half. I went to a neurologist, as you do. They gave me medication which had severe side effects, so I couldn't take them. Went to another neurologist. Are you sure this is Parkinson's? Yes, it is. Here, try this other medication. Supposedly the gold standard. This is the best medication for you. And I knew it. It was. Still, huge side effects. Couldn't take it. So, traditional medicine has nothing left for me. The fortified cities are falling. I went to a physio, a very good Christian physio. She tried to help me out with stiffness and things like that, exercises, stretching, all that. I probably overdid it. As you all know, I ended up with a torn calf in December last year. That was a major setback, and most of this year actually has been trying to recover from that. So I'm seeing a naturopath, I'm taking naturopathic medicine, I'm getting bone therapy. Much of it is doing incremental things for me. It's helping. Some of you will know that I first came across this because I couldn't write my Christmas cards. Well, my handwriting has stabilized, and this hand, which was really swollen up, is now much better thanks to the naturopath. This is about the same size as this hand. I can actually slip this ring onto this finger now for the first time in about a year and a half. So things are happening. It's not all disastrous, but it's not fixing it either. I guess the biggest problem for me is how tired I am all the time. Somebody, I think quite a few of you will notice, the pastor looks tired. I saw someone I hadn't seen in a couple of months said, you look tired. And another person said, how long have you been as tired as this? I said, about 4 years. Those of you who've been with us for a long time know I took sabbatical in 2014, 3 months, which was very good. And I came back from that feeling awake, not tired anymore for the first time, and I can't remember how long. That lasted about 3 more months, and by the end of 2014, I'm tired again. So about 4 years. I want to thank Reverend Lee for being very understanding about this. All this can be discouraging. That is the intent of Satan. That is the intent of this field commander. He's trying to shake the people's confidence. And so he comes back with a second speech, trying to make the people desert Hezekiah or overthrow him or just walk away. He says in verse 14, Hezekiah is trying to deceive you. Don't trust him. It's a lie. You can't trust in the Lord to save you. Another lie. Come across to Assyria, surrender. We'll give you a good life. We'll give you each man his own vine and own fig tree. A lie. 46 destroyed cities shows that surrendering to the Assyrians is not an option because you'll be slaves. You won't get your own piece of land. And the biggest and most fatal error of all, in verse 19 and 20, he accuses the Lord of Israel of being no better than other gods. He goes around and says, I've beaten all these other nations. We've beaten all these other nations. None of their gods were any help. Your God is no different. That's fatal. Fatal to the Assyrians, because they got it so wrong. So what does Hezekiah do? Chapter 37. When King Hezekiah heard this, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and went into the temple of the Lord. And I think we miss too much in that, because it's just a verse. Hezekiah humbled himself. He had been relying on military and political strategy for so long. In 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles, it talks about this episode. And what we don't hear is that before this assault on his nation, he sent the king of Assyria a large amount of gold, trying to buy him off. Don't invade, and I'll give you all this gold. In fact, just take it as a present. Please don't invade us. So the Assyrians took the gold and invaded anyway. It's what a totalitarian superpower might do. What the citizens of Hong Kong are afraid that China's going to do to them. It might happen. But Hezekiah has a great response. When he heard this, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth. He's repenting. He's saying, I'm wrong. He's saying, God, I need your help. I can't trust in all these other things. They have failed. I need you now. And then he goes to the temple. He doesn't ask the prophet to come to him or the priest to come to him. He goes to the temple to meet God. In verse 2, he seeks out the prophet Isaiah and asks, as there's a little speech there, the summary is that they ask him to pray. And there was one great commentator who says that Hezekiah's response was his great secret weapons. He became humble. He went to the Lord. He had a prophet, and he prayed. And Isaiah says, I've already got a word for you. I don't need to pray anymore. Verse 7 of chapter 37, he says, listen, when he hears a certain report, I will make him want to return to his own country, and there I will have him cut down with a sword. So he hears a rumor. In the next few verses, there's a rumor of an Ethiopian army coming towards him. And he withdraws the siege of Lachish. And Jews are filled with hope, and they think, the Lord's doing something. Maybe this is our deliverance. And as the army retreats, the field commander comes back and said, don't be so hopeful. We'll be back. Don't rejoice just yet. We'll destroy you. And again, he goes and talks about this. He says, you can't trust in the Lord. And Hezekiah then goes to the temple and offers this prayer. He doesn't ask the prophet to pray. He prays himself. And he takes the letter and he spreads it out in the temple, and he prays what people said it's one of his best prayers. This is Hezekiah at his best. Verse 16, Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, enthroned between the cherubim, you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Give ear, Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, Lord, and see. Listen to all the words Sennacherib has sent to ridicule the living God. It's true that the Assyrian kings have laid waste all these people and their lands. They have thrown their gods into the fire and destroyed them, for they were not gods, but only wood and stone, fashioned by human hands. Now, Lord our God, deliver us from his hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you, Lord, are the only God. It's all about God. I think that we don't often pray this kind of prayer. When we come to God and we have a prayer, we say, it's all about me. I need this. Please give me that. Get me out of trouble here. This prayer is all about God. It starts with God, it ends with God, it's all about God. He's talking about God's majesty and power. You're great, you're strong, you own everything, you made everything. It's your honor that's been challenged. It's not our lives that are a threat, but people are making fun of you. You're different from all the other gods. They're nothing. You're the real one. Show that you are great. And we see once again the power of worship. Because when we worship, we focus on our answer. We stop looking at our problem. Problems are still there, still in the back of the mind somewhere, but it's not our central focus anymore. The power of worship. Power of worship is seen throughout the Bible. The other great one was King Jehoshaphat. He had to face 3 armies. Not 1, not 2, but 3 armies. And he prayed, and the prophet said to him, God's going to give you victory. And he sent the musicians out. In modern times, we know of things like worship evangelism, which I hope we can do soon. Worship evangelism, where I've heard about at other churches in Sydney, is where the worship band and the congregation are worshiping God so strongly that unbelievers there give their lives to Christ without a word being preached. It's the power of worship, the presence of God that convicts people. And God gives a response down in verse 21. This is what the Lord of Israel says: because you have prayed concerning Sennacherib, king of Assyria, the Lord has spoken. And it's not that Hezekiah is twisting God's arm. He's fulfilling some legal ritual. He's ticked all the boxes. That's not why God answers. It's a partnership. We have the privilege of being in spiritual partnership with God. We have this great privilege that when we need someone, we pray, God acts. Not always according to what we say or what we ask, but we know that God acts in the very best and eternal way. And he actually takes task with the king of Assyria. He said, you thought you were so great, verse 22. And later on, 26, haven't you heard this was always my plan? You thought it's your plan, your greatness, your power, but it's me. I know where you are, I know who you are, and I will drag you home. And as for Hezekiah, I'm going to save you and give you peace. Now, I hope that none of you ever face an illness like mine. I hope that none of you ever face terminal cancer. And may God bless all of you with happy and healthy and successful lives. That would be a good thing. And I hope that as we are blessed and successful in this way, we'll always be faithful to God. We'll always trust him. We'll always put him front and first. But even if you are thoroughly blessed in this life, there is one last enemy that we must all face together. We're all going to die. It doesn't matter how rich or powerful you are, how many friends you have, what you think you have done in the church or in the world, you're all going to die. And as they say quite often, when you die, nothing else matters. You can't take any of it with you. So before we get there, we really should be here. The message of the first 39 chapters of Isaiah, and we're going to see some more of it in the next few weeks. The message of the first 39 chapters is trust the Lord. All others will let you down sometime. Some of you who've been here long enough know I'm quite imperfect. I let people down, and I don't mean to do it. But it happens. Through short-sightedness, through imperfect planning, through a whole bunch of things, sometimes outside of our control, I let people down. Trust God, not me. That's the message of the first half of Isaiah, trusting the Lord. And he has to say it in 39 chapters because the Jews are like us. They don't always get it the first time. We always think, I'll trust the Lord. Yeah, that's a good idea. But I'll try this thing first. I'll trust the Lord, but, along with what else I'm doing. I'll trust the Lord, but only up to this far. I can do these things. And often, the things we do actually make our situation worse. If I learned anything about being chronically ill, is that whatever I do, I've got to ask God first. If I go to the physio and he says, don't go there, I'm going to tear my calf muscle. If I go to a therapist and he says, that's okay, I will improve. When I'm away for the next 3 months, I'm hoping to get on one last experimental treatment, which has promising results. But I don't know what's going to happen. Right? If things go very well, you may see me back here in 3 or 4 months' time dancing, which will be a miracle in itself since I haven't danced since year 6. If things go not so well, I don't know what happens then. Because it's experimental. Nobody knows. It's not proven. We have to trust the Lord. I really didn't want to be morbid today. It did turn out a bit that way because we need to focus on God. We need to look to the one that can answer our prayers. We need to be faithful to the one who is always faithful to us. This is our God. So it's quite appropriate that we should ask the worship team to come up and lead us in worship. Trust in the Lord.